Hi there, we are here live at the Dassault Systèmes 3D Experience Forum, and you heard me, we are live. And I'm very excited to take this first interview live at the event. I have George Blankenship here with me. George is the keynote speaker of the event, and since this is live and in real time, I can say I just walked out of the main stage, I saw your keynote, and I enjoyed it, and from one guy who does a little bit of that himself to another, you're pretty good. I'm going to hide this from the world. You may be better than me.
Oh, no, no.
It doesn't really matter. But you talked about something, George, that's really near and dear to my heart. And before we start the conversation, I should just say for everybody out there, past career, Apple, Amazon, Tesla. So some pretty, I don't know, is there more?
Gap, 20 years.
And Gap. I had Gap jeans when I was a kid.
I have a lot of them today.
I found out from your presentation, I sit right squarely in between the Gen X and the millennial.
Yep.
In fact, in your chart, there was a year, 1981, that I was born, and it didn't make it the chart, 1980, 1982. But kids born my year, we wore Gap jeans. We shopped at the Gap, and you were one of the guys that kind of revolutionized the shopping experience.
We tried.
At the Gap. So, some pretty cool companies. Early in the presentation, you said you must be one of the luckiest guys to have landed, but I have a feeling it's a little bit more than luck. So quickly, tell me a little bit, how did you end up, say from Gap to Apple? Like, just give me a minute, the story. How did that all come together?
I've been trying to retire ever since the Gap, and I was winding down at the Gap, and I ended up on the phone one day with Mickey Drexler and Steve Jobs, and Mickey said, George, Steve wants to talk about doing some stores. Steve, go ahead. So he started firing questions at me, and I started firing answers back. And about 5 minutes goes by, and Mickey goes, hey, listen, you guys are getting along just fine. Steve, I got to go to a meeting. And he jumped off the phone. I'm on the phone with Steve Jobs. We chatted for 20 minutes. He goes, can we meet? I said, sure, let's meet. So I went down, I met with him, we walked around campus. He said, I want you to come to work at Apple and help me with the stores thing. So I ended up at Apple. I spent 6 years there. Retired, helped Microsoft do some stuff, and then I started getting these emails from Elon Musk saying, Elon Musk would like to speak to you, give me a call. So I called him, we sat down, we chatted, we talked about fast cars and customers and Apple stores. I said, why'd you come to work at Tesla? So I went to Tesla and sort of worked on the auto industry, and then I retired from there and now help out Amazon a little bit with their brick and mortar rollout.
So, safe to say that somehow you just made like 30 years happen in, we'll give it a minute.
A minute.
A minute. 30 years in 1 minute.
Move everything fast.
That's like the part of 60 Seconds, the show, with George Blankenship. But so you've bounced from these companies, and one of the probably true ways you could define all those companies you named, and people may or may not say the Gap, but the Gap had its time where it was one of the most, forward, innovative companies on the planet. But to Apple, to Tesla, and now you're also doing some consulting with Amazon. Some of those innovative companies in the planet. What is some of the common DNA characteristics that is there anything that between all these companies you really saw in common that has made them so innovative against the markets and industries they serve?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to have a leader with conviction. And in each of those companies, there was a leader with conviction. And that leader looked around at what was possible, not what was limited and what you can't do. A lot of people focus on what the regulations say you can't do, and it sort of limits their thinking. At each of those companies, there's a leader with conviction who looks at what's possible and then expands on that. And I think the next thing is, at each of those companies, in the people that they hire and work at those companies, average performers don't make it. Now I know that's a really tough thing to say, really tough, but an average performer in a really innovative and progressive company just doesn't belong there. You need a group of people who see a bigger picture and they're inspired by the bigger picture, because you need that kind of a team to go do some of the crazy stuff that the leader comes up with, and it's out there. But you have a can-do attitude, and that's what I think sets all those companies apart, is they have this incredible leader and an incredible team behind it that believe that anything is possible.
So you have people change, and really culture is kind of what you're pointing to. These companies had a kind of a DNA in their culture that drove the innovation. It was because everybody was on a same path, and they were all really passionate, and they believed in something. And even though some of these leaders are borderline insane, right? I mean, when you really get, and maybe I'll say that you won't.
But that's what's exciting about it, because what they come up with seems insane when it first comes up with, let's do an electric car that'll go 250 miles on a charge and you can plug it in anywhere. That was crazy 10 years ago. But a whole group of people got behind it and made it happen. So was it insane at the beginning? Sure, but it happened.
Okay, so just saying, the one reason I haven't bought a Tesla yet, I'm going to confess this, and maybe you can help me sell. You know, I like sporty cars. I've had a BMW M5 and a Porsche and a couple of, and I like the vroom vroom. And so someone said to me, well, why can't they create a mode that makes it sound like vroom vroom? And you know, you talked about creep. So you think it's possible though? Because you know, there's such like an affinity that people have between cars, because the Tesla's faster than the Porsche, it's faster than the BMW.
Yep.
But you know, and I'm kind of probably making a little mockery of myself by going vroom vroom, but I'm saying like I still can't get over when I'm in it. I feel like, you know, I'm a golfer. I feel like I'm just got into the fastest golf cart on the planet. You know, do you think like things like that, is that possible though? I mean, from a company like Tesla where they could create that, I mean, simulation, if enough people asked for it, they could create something like that?
They could create anything. Okay, Tesla can create anything. And could they do that? Yes, there's no question they could do that. I want to say there's an iPhone app out, I think, that does that. It senses with the accelerometer, it senses the acceleration, and I think it plays through the stereo, through the USB, and I think it can do that. But there's a difference. You know, I was a Porsche guy, I had 4 911s. You know, I was a Porsche guy. My favorite place to drive was up on the highways trying to, you know, push me on the speed limit and not get caught. But in a Tesla, the favorite place to drive is first in line at a red light, because all that vroom you're talking about, what ends up happening is you're sitting at the red light and you want to use the car. You want to use the car. Light turns green, you make all this noise and everybody looks at you like, who is this guy? In a Tesla, my goal in a Tesla is to hit the speed limit before I get through the intersection. And nobody cares, because it's instant acceleration with no noise. So I'm not showing off, I'm just getting there faster than everybody else.
So you're just the next guy, you know, I maybe there's not enough demand, because like you said about the idling or the creep, yep. There's a mode if people want to roll at the stoplight, because that's yep. not something that happens with an electric vehicle.
Well, it doesn't need to.
It doesn't, right.
That's a beautiful, there's nothing running. When you're sitting there, it's just waiting for you to say, let's go.
Right.
There's nothing running. It's just sitting there.
But people have a relationship with that. They want to accidentally rear end the guy in front of them when they take their foot. It's just, they're passionate about it. So they developed it and said, hey, that was a really neat story though.
Well, it's all about the customer. Think about it. The car doesn't need to do it. It's saving energy by not doing it, right? But the customer wanted that. So software update, overnight your car changes, you can come out in the morning, push a button, your car will creep forward at a stoplight. Which, taking care of the customer.
So there's a common thread here, and at Dassault Systèmes they like to say digital thread. I've, you know, digital transformation, digital thread, digital twin, lots of vernacular, but there's another word that's kind of come up, experience. And so you talked about culture, but I would question, challenge you to say, is experience not something that's at the core of every one of these companies? In their DNA as well, that they have a vision of what experiences should look like, whether it's in the store, in the automobile, when you pick up the phone. Is that another thing that maybe all the companies you've worked with has in common, and can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. For Mickey Drexler, the experience of the store itself and the staff, incredibly important. At Apple, before we opened the first store, right, we rented a warehouse about 3 miles from the corporate office, and big warehouse, and we built the store inside that warehouse. We built it so we could understand how would the customer engage with it, how would the experience be. And we got the whole store built and stood back and looked at it and went, no, that's not right. Tore it down, built another store, a completely different store. Built it, stood back, said, no, that's not right. Tore it down, built a third store. No, I felt too trade show oriented. Tore it down, built a fourth store, stood back and said, this is what we want. That's what opened to the public so that the experience would be right. So 3 failures, 1 success, Apple Store opens, 1,500 people in line. Experience.
And you kind of called out something else that I talk about a lot and that you see and you hear on a lot of stages, is this whole about failing fast. And you know, the public sees this Apple Store, the cool glass cubes in Chicago or New York City, and they think, oh, they dreamt it, they built it, and away they go. But I mean, that's the kind of the way the public's grown to see these things. And you being behind the scenes, you said, nope, fail, start, fail, start. So for you, it was, what did you learn? How quickly can we rebuild it? But in every case, you've talked about experience. When you talked about Apple, you talked about experience. When you've talked about Tesla, even that creep we just talked about with the car, that's experience. That's what somebody's used to, wants, and feels. You talked about the iPod to the phone, that people's experience, even the free beer app. Where there's a beer app. I didn't even know that existed. It's called Free Beer. You can sit there and you drink and make your friends jealous that you just had a free beer on your app. So I got one more quick question for you. Amazon seems to be winning in everything they touch. And you talked a little bit about Amazon. We didn't talk about it much here through the interview, but like the Go concept, I want to hit you on that. You talked about what that experience is. Is that going to hit the mainstream? Is that what's next for the combined retail, shopping, buying, technology, all blended into one experience? Has Amazon nailed it?
Well, I think if you're looking for a job and you go to Amazon and you go to their top 10 corporate principles, number one is the customer orientation. The Go concept that you're talking, they have 10 principles that they live by at Amazon, and number one is the customer. Everything is around the customer. So take the Go concept. They've got one open. It's open and operating in Seattle. But think about the concept behind it, okay? They stood back 4 years ago and said, what don't people like about shopping in brick and mortar stores? They don't like waiting in line to pay for their goods. Amazon Go, scan the app, walk in, put the phone away, take stuff off the shelves, just walk out. It's called just walk out technology. And that's what you do. And when you get out, boom, your phone, and you've got a picture and a price of what you want. But the key is, what drove that was not the technology, it was Amazon's focus on the customer. That's the key. Everything they do is focused on the customer. So it drove to a technology, but Amazon Go isn't about technology for technology's sake. It's about taking technology to enhance a customer experience. And that runs as a common thread through everything Amazon does.
And that's a beautiful way to wrap this up. George Blankenship, thank you so much.
And my pleasure.